Welcome back to Velocity Invitational. Jonathan Green here, bringing you the action from Laguna Seca, the fabled Laguna Seca, and the perfect place in many ways to celebrate what has been a fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to our organizers, Jeffrey O'Neill and Ryan Turi, who have been out and about both in cars and organizing the event. But I'm delighted to be joined in the booth as we get ready for our next group action by two, well, stalwarts of American motor racing who were very much a part of what Trans Am was in the day, the roaring sound of Trans Am. And it's John Morton and Peter Brock, Peter Brock. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for sharing your time with us. I'm here, so delighted that you're here to celebrate this era of Trans Am, and one that doesn't get, I don't think, enough time on air that the historic Trans Am does, which we love, and the muscle car wars were exactly what defined Trans Am. But as a Brit, as a European, to see the Japanese influence, to see the British cars as well, and to see the European cars take on the American muscle, and see how effectively that changed also the way the Americans approached stock car racing as well at this level and in Trans Am. Guys, just talk a little bit about that, because it's such an exciting issue. If you've got a copy of the program, you can read the article. First of all, John, your memories and your thoughts on that.
Well, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, okay. One of the brightest parts of my life was the two years I ran the Trans Am with Peter's team, the BRE team, and it was really the inauguration of Japanese cars in America. After that period, I raced for Nissan quite a bit and Toyota a little bit, but there was no reputation for Japanese cars until Peter put that team together, and we won the first professional race that a Japanese car ever won in America, and I think the reception it's gotten today is testament to how important that was so long ago. It's 51 years ago, and they've been going strong ever since. Whether it's Nissan or Mazda or whomever, it's the Japanese cars have reached a level of excellence.
And Peter, unlike the ways that the Jaguars arrived here, or the TR6s and some of the European cars, the Porsches obviously, when they first came to Pebble Beach to race, it wasn't as a manufacturer. When Japan came here, it was serious stuff. They wanted to both race and sell their automobiles, which was a big stretch given the market. They were known for making smaller displacement cars, and no one really thought they had a chance.
Well, I think we understand that we were really breaking new ground at that time, because at that time there was no sedan racing in the United States. The Sports Car Club of America was totally sports cars. So the whole idea of racing sedans really began in the Southern California area, and we had a small group called the Good Guys Sedan Racers, and we began racing with the Cal Club. And of course this allowed us to bring in all of the foreign cars at that time that nobody had ever seen on the track. So there were people running Mini Coopers, they were running Lotus Cortinas, they were running Saabs, everything. So to bring the Japanese cars in at that time was a great thing, because people could compare directly against BMW and Alfa-Romeo, who were our main competitors in that class. And it really built some great competition among the spectators. I mean, they would group on different corners and yell at each other, and it was a lot of fun to be a spectator at that time, because they were so pro-Japanese cars or pro-Italian or pro-German. So
it must have been a really interesting era, because, like you say, we've kind of gone through that history this morning, from our Group 1 all the way through. But you see the evolution, if you will, of, first of all, the British, the European cars coming over from ERA, and then Bugatti, and then on through Jaguar and so on and so forth. Porsche obviously playing a big role. But then when the Japanese came in, they kind of did the best of both worlds. They took the muscle car, or the muscle engine, and the reliability of that, and they took the best of the nimble sort of Lotus stroke Colin Chapman inventions, and then they brought the two together, and that's where you kind of get that Datsun-Nissan kind of amalgamation of Japanese, an era, if you will, where they really sprung into action, and it took America racing by storm.
I think what happened was they aligned themselves with an American team, the BRE team, and the BRE team knew the whole, the whole spectrum. So they knew how to sort of meld the Japanese image into the American psyche. And I believe that's really what it amounted to.
And this is what we're going to be seeing in Group 8 later today, and really excited for this. Of the cars we're seeing on track now, and I mean, these are, well, the Group 6 cars, the production sports car and FIA sport prototypes from 63 to 69, but I'm sure you've got memories of these cars, especially this one, running around Le Mans in the hands of a Chris Amon or a Dan Gurney. But this was an exciting time for racing, the late 50s, early 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. Well, Peter and I both worked for Carroll Shelby at that time. And that picture you just showed was kind of almost the culmination of the Shelby era, which we both participated in to a degree. Peter more so than I, but he designed the Cobra Coupe, one of the most iconic race cars ever to race at Le Mans.
But that was a classic example of what I'm talking about, of going, okay, how can we go a little smaller, a little bit more nimble, but still have the power?
Yeah, well, that's what, that's kind of what we did. We took American ingenuity, great engines. We had American engine builders and American mechanics, and took a Japanese car. And to be honest, I had no idea they were going to be so successful.
Peter, how hard was it to raise money in those days? We always, still to this day, talk about sponsorship being the key to motor racing. It is an expensive sport, and if you want to go racing and you want to pay racing drivers, it costs money. Was it harder to raise sponsorship and get people interested back then, given that you were bringing something kind of new to racing at the time?
Well, we were very, very fortunate to have a visionary in the president of Nissan Motor Corporation at that time, Mr. Yutaka Katayama. If it hadn't have been for him to allow us to do what we thought we could do from not only the standpoint of doing the development, but also creating a whole image of Japanese American cars and how it could work for the American market. I think that was one of the things that really made it successful, is Katayama's agreement to allow us to do what we wanted to do, instead of directing us like most Japanese companies want to tell you exactly how to do something, but they don't have the understand of the American market. And Katayama had that. He had come over here actually and gone to college when he was like 19 years old, and he understood Americans. So he brought that whole American culture into the Japanese thing far ahead of anybody else, and that's what made the company successful.
Yeah, and I would have thought in the early days, because of the way that we're all set in our ways in every country, we all think we do it the best way, and I'm sure there was pushback, but that's what I love about motor racing is one of those sports and one of those industries where if you can prove it on the racetrack, then the cynicism kind of wanes. When you beat a Shelby or you beat a Mustang with a Japanese car, suddenly people sit up. And when people like Paul Newman start winning SCCA championships, and yourself and all the rest of it, it suddenly starts, it changes the world a little bit, and it also changes the image that you have.
Well, the other thing is that the whole cost of the Japanese car, you could buy a Datsun 510 at that time for $3,400.
Wow. For
another $3,400, you could have a really competitive little car to run on the track and run against the known names like BMW and Alfa-Romeo. And I think that brought that whole youth market in, because it brought a whole new generation into the sport that hadn't been able to participate prior to that point.
Yeah, I think, I'm always amazed that people today, young people whose parents weren't born when we did this, championship or these two championships, that they really care anymore, but they do. They're really drawn to these particular cars and this particular team, and I don't understand it, but I like it.
Well, we're watching Horatio Fitzsimon. We interviewed him. He's a young Englishman who's out there at the moment in a Lotus Elan, and listening to you talking about Carroll Shelby. I wonder how often you would talk about a Colin Chapman, somebody like that, who in his own way was a magnificent innovator and designer, obviously from the other side of the pond, but brought so much to motor racing, and I'm sure a lot that you guys, when you were tinkering and trying to build, would learn from.
Well, my first 2 race cars were Lotuses, so
Okay.
yes, you're right.
Well, we're watching. He's leading at the moment in a Lotus Elan, but here's a beautiful Porsche, that number 37. That's a Porsche 910 from '67. David Hagen at the wheel, but you know, Porsche, fantastic history, and it's almost bulletproof. I don't think there's a car that they produced where you could really pull it apart and go, well, what that was a dog. That never worked.
Yeah. Well, you could take them apart, but sometimes they were a little hard to put back together. At least the cars like the 910 or the 917.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Brian Rebb and Jackie Hicks about the 917, and they were like, oh, it was a beast, it was a monster. And I'm like, yeah, but you won in it. They're like, well, we had to. You had to race what you got. But he said, I didn't mean it was a good car, but we raced it.
Yeah, it wasn't a safe car.
No. Yeah, they made it as lightweight and as fast as they possibly could. Not dissimilar to the Trans Am days for the muscle cars either, but that's racing. You take your advantages where you can get them, right, Peter?
Yep. Yeah, what you don't know won't hurt you.
Exactly. What were those days like? I mean, you mentioned the crowds. I mean, they were really popular races back then, and I mean, I hope we can get back to those glory days. I mean, NASCAR has had a phenomenal purple patch in the last 20 years, but I hope that, you know, the more production-based and the more sort of what we're seeing in IMSA now with production-based cars as well as the prototypes, I hope it has a real purple era where people come back in throngs and like in Australia, back the manufacturer.
I think so too. Some of the cars get so exotic and so difficult to understand what's going on, so highly refined that the audience sort of loses the understanding. One of the popular things about NASCAR is everybody knows how a Chevy works or a Ford, a pushrod engine, and they've really struggled to keep the absolute high-tech stuff at a minimum. And I think with the production cars, the same holds true. The production cars are more interesting to watch, really, than cars that are much faster, but a little difficult to understand. The ground effect cars, and I mean, the Cadillacs and the various prototypes, the Lexuses. You don't identify with them like you do a 911 Porsche or a Ferrari, or a car that you can recognize.
And Peter, as we're looking at these cars, which are a combination of, European and American cars from Ford Shelbys, Porsches, etc., Chevron even, British manufacturer. We've got a Sunbeam out there, a Sunbeam Tiger, but we're looking at a Mustang now. I mean, give me a sense of how the Japanese thought in their own minds that they could take on this world, because, I mean, it's almost a ridiculous thought when you think about it, to go racing against these mighty manufacturers. But they did it. So what's the mentality? How did the you mentioned it earlier, they let you get on with it, and that was because Katayama basically grew up here and went to college here. But it's the mentality. I get the feeling that the Japanese are tinkerers. They love the technology, and that's where they really come good. You give them a project, you say, I need to lose the weight here and here and here, and I need this much horsepower. And they can do that. But they're not so much, they don't go about their racing the same way perhaps the Americans and the Europeans do. Would you agree?
Well, I think one of the things that we really did is we brought the American sort of hot rod culture into developing the Japanese cars. They didn't do that much in Japan at that time. There wasn't really a whole tuner group over there. Now it's become huge, really, really big.
It's the big deal now.
Yeah, but I think that we made that conversion, and especially we had a great engine man named Art Early at that time who was building our engines and did a lot of the development on the engine and brought that engine really into a competitive state. Prior to that point, it hadn't been. We had a lot of problems with it at the beginning, and Art was the one who really discovered how to make that engine work. So that whole tuner culture and everything started, right, with the American ability to modify a production engine.
And it's true today too, and I almost think it would be nice to have a Goodwood type affair in Japan. I've done quite a lot of racing and coverage of racing in Japan, and when you go to some of the festivals there, I've done a lot of GT racing, and then they like us, you know, bring out some older cars and whatever, and they of course absolutely revere what they've also put on track themselves, like Honda, Nissan, and so many other companies, Mitsubishi, so on and so forth. But what's interesting is their love is different, if you like. Their mindset is kind of different than they see it, because Japan, as you well know, is almost, it's not a closed society, but it took a long time and it's open much more now. But you know and I know that going to the Japan in the 80s, there was still no road signs. You couldn't hire a rental car because you couldn't read the road signs. Now it's different. Everybody speaks English, or at least it's a much more open society. But they were always a closed society, and that was just, in some ways, it didn't hold them back, but it made it very insular in terms of that it didn't often travel. And so it's only when you actually spend some time in Japan that you understand their world.
Well, I had the good fortune of going to the Nismo Festival.
Oh, yeah.
And in the early 2000s. And it was a one brand festival, Nissan, Datsun. And it was incredible. The spectators, the enthusiasm over one brand of Japanese car. I was shocked, to be honest.
I think Americans would be amazed. I've done a lot of the GT races, and you go to a Super GT race, and the queues of fans looking for an autograph, they'll wait from 6 in the morning just to get one autograph from a Jan Maldenborough or any of the Japanese superstars. And the same in Super Formula. That's another side of Japanese racing that, you know, kind of goes under the radar a little bit. I mean, our current FR championship, F3 championship here in the States, you get to win a prize to go into Super Formula. And then you look at people like Pierre Gasly and Michael Schumacher and guys that have come up the ranks in Japan when they started out. And yet the Formula Nippon, as it was known then, and still is now, Super Formula, it's such a robust and fantastic race scene of single-seaters. And as you say, the love of motor racing, I mean, I would put it up there with the Italians.
It is. It's a little less frantic, maybe.
Yeah.
But it is. It's very much like more so than the Americans. I mean, you've got your fans, NASCAR fans, but they're not as rabid as the Japanese fans or the Italian fans.
Well, we're watching our Group 6 feature race, but I've had the opportunity to talk to John Morton and Peter about these wonderful cars that they were involved in. Let me ask you another question. Peter, how did you get involved in motor racing? How did you get the bug?
You start out with a little kid, you know. I mean, if you talk to anybody that's been in racing, they all start out pretty darn young. I started out about 12, and I think John pretty got excited the first couple of races he went to with his dad. And there just isn't anything like it when you're that age, and it's so exciting. And the fact that it's individuals that are out there doing something that you can't do any other way except as an individual. You know, any other sort of major event that you have to do has to be a large corporation with a lot of money. And of course, it's more like that today, but during our period of time, it was the era of the privateer, and a privateer could do really quite well.
Yeah, well, for me, I was 65 years ago. My dad took me to Elkhart Lake for the first sports car race I'd ever seen. I remember Carroll Shelby finished second, Phil Hill finished first, Eddie Crawford finished third. This was 1957. And on that day, 65 years ago, I said, that's what I'm going to do with my life.
That's a lovely story. We're watching Gear Ramleth here on the final lap. And we mentioned the Lotus, but the Lotus 23B going strong in 2022, and that's what I love about this sport. You throw names out like 60 years ago, but that's perfect for this weekend because the cars that we're watching are 60, 50 years old, and they're still going strong. And it's as relevant today, I feel, as it always was, and it's as thrilling today as it always was.
Yeah.
So Gear Ramleth coming out of the last corner here in that Lotus. to finish off ahead of Kyle Kelly here on the final lap. And somewhat appropriate, we spent a little time talking about the ingenuity of the Lotus and how John Morton and Peter Brock have got their starts in racing. Are you looking forward to seeing those cars out on track? Are you going to be out there?
I'm going to be doing a pace lap. That's all. But it's in the car that we won the championship here in 1971.
So tell me what to look out for.
Look out. Yeah. Yeah, and the 2-liter here.
Here you go.
Yeah. Look out for car
Obviously
number
the Datsun 510s.
72.
Yep.
Car 72. And that's Rob Fuller.
Yep.
He's likely to win. And there was a BMW that almost beat him yesterday. And I can't remember.
BMW?
I'm not sure. It was a BMW 2002. I'm not sure which one.
he was running second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen.
It was a gold one. Yeah, that one.
And
that's all. Yep, a 71.
Rob Fuller in 72.
All right, we'll look out
number
for
1.
that. Well, guys, let me pause you there because we're about to do a completely different demonstration, but rally cars are coming on track. If you've got time, I know you're going to be out there in the pace lap, but if you've got time, come back and talk some more because it's absolutely enthralling and it's such a really important part of the history of motor racing here in the United States. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
John Morton.
Thanks.
Peter Brock, thank you so much. You're
Great.
very welcome. Please come back again, either during Group 8 or afterwards to talk about it, and we'll have a beer and have a chat.